Welcome to Crossing the Last Mile, a podcast by UNAIDS East and Southern Africa, hosted by Anne Givuku Shongwe. Join us for this and other episodes as we tell the remarkable story of resilience and undying hope for the journey to end AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. This podcast is supported by the Partnership Together for SRHR and is available on all podcast platforms. Walk with us as we go crossing the last mile. Welcome to Crossing the Last Mile. The data tells us an uncomfortable truth. HIV follows inequality.
Living in hiding somewhere in this suburb is a refuge for members of the LGBT+ community. 5 years ago, Benson was kicked out of his home by his father when he found out he was gay. He was just a high school student.
The new bill affects me a lot. For example, I can't walk anywhere. Even our neighbours threaten to kill us. I'm really not safe here. There's a lot more homophobia. I don't feel safe.
Across the world, people pushed to the margins of society, sex workers, gay men, and other men who have sex with men, people who inject drugs, and people in prisons remain most vulnerable. Not because of who they are, but because of systems that exclude and criminalize them. We cannot end AIDS without them. That is why today we're speaking to Richard Lusimbo, fearless LGBTQ activist and HIV advocate who has built a powerful coalition that strengthens key populations and drives change. A bold, compassionate, and strategic leader, Richard's journey challenges, inspires, and demands to be heard. Join us as we explore his story, impact, and vision for crossing the last mile.
My name is Richard Lusimbo, the Director General of Uganda Key Population Consortium. We're a consortium of 140 organizations that are LGBTIQ+, sex workers, and people who inject and use drugs. But my work really focuses around advocacy for the communities, which sometimes I say the most criminalized and marginalized in Uganda. And of course, working regionally and also globally to ensure that the voices of communities across the board are heard.
Thanks, Richard. What inspired you to get engaged with work on HIV and working with communities who are really at the margins? And you're doing so in Uganda, which is the country that is most loudest known in our region and in the world, actually. It became quite famous in 2024, 2025 because of the famous anti-homosexuality law, AHA, which is famously known now and has been copied by others.
For me, HIV is personal. At a very tender age, I was affected in our family, and I felt I needed to do something. And it was at a time when there wasn't treatment as it is today, and there was a lot of stigma, a lot of discrimination. And from that point, I picked myself and I joined young people. We're among the first young people that worked with the AIDS support organization, TASO, under the Youth AIDS Challenge Club. And through this club, we would go to schools to speak about prevention, speak about discrimination, speak about stigma and fighting it. But also we would do home visits. In fact, we were among the first young people who launched the Positive Living, which was the sunflower, and we would go to homes of bedridden clients and support them, wash clothes, cook for them food, but also sometimes we'd take foodstuffs. And at that time, I was still in secondary school. And for me, at that moment, I felt it was my civic duty to really speak out against stigma and discrimination, but also express and send love to others who needed it more than I needed it. And it's from that point that I felt I needed to do something beyond that. And even when I went through university, and even now getting to my activism at the moment that people are seeing, but it came from that point of love and care, but also from that point of loss that really pushed me to do something. And now when we get to really advocacy, especially around LGBT, and really seeing how in 2009 in Uganda, we have a law tabled in Parliament. 2013, in December, it's passed in Parliament, and 2014 becomes law. Just seeing the kind of stigma, but also the kinds of attack that were pushed towards the community, again, it gave me another reason to fight back, because I have always been that person who believes in harmony as an African principle. And this is something I learned from my grandmother. She would always tell me that if you quarrel with somebody, make sure that by the time the sun goes down, you have either apologized or you have reconciled.
If you were to sort of say to other young people, you know, this is a principle that could change the future of our country, you know, how do you actually find that inspiration, and how do you inspire other young people?
We need to create a space where people feel compassion for others. And I find that the world we live in today lately is that it's a world of clicks and social media, and people feel like by clicking the love or the like, they have really extended a hand. And I think we need to take ourselves out of that and start going back to feeling, but to really bring people to the heart of really service, especially volunteering, but also just really doing the civic duty, is something that we all have to take on deliberately and discuss and make it as one of those things that we do freely. And it could be something we do at our workplace. It's something that we do at home. Like, how do we exchange compassion to our neighbors who may not have? Look at what the Gen Zs are doing. Using social media, they are speaking about the issues that are affecting them in society. And I think we can also use the same energy and force to actually say, hey, beyond just speaking about these issues and trying to look for action, there is someone who is in a ditch that needs a hand, that we need to pull them out before we can continue to the next thing.
You're building values like harmony and service. And you now run this incredible organization, 140 members. That's massive. That's a massive consortium. First of all, if you were to talk through who are the populations that you represent, you know, key populations is a term that is used very much in the health sector and in the HIV world, but not necessarily by all of society. So who are key populations?
LGBTQ plus organizations, sex work-led organizations in their diversity, people who inject and use drugs in their diversity, and now working collaboratively together. And one of the things that has kept us going, because we're all having competing issues, there's always a way we're told we're not organized. And it's from that I felt like we needed to have a unifying voice, to have a common agenda, but also to really fight for our space, but also the resources. But what has really kept us going and what has kept the consortium going is really one of the things is I understanding that I don't wake up to work for me. I work for my community and on behalf of my community. It's just not my voice, but it's the voice of my community. And also building together around a common agenda and common goal has helped also diffuse sometimes what commonly comes out as conflict because of not understanding what's happening, but also communicating effectively on what's happening and what is being planned, but also in the spaces that I represent the community, I have to account back. But also even in terms of raising resources and mobilizing resources, these resources do not belong to entities, they belong to the community. And the best thing to do is when resources are gotten or are being mobilized, communicate to the community. And this is what we continue to do. And it's working for us because we are the center, but we are together with our community. The community is not secondary here. Community is primary. And that's how we've been able to really push forward. And sometimes people ask me, how are you managing and all? I'm not managing anything. Community is managing me because I am that vessel that, or that speaker or microphone that through which their voices are heard. And it has also enabled us to really collaborate and engage with government, engage with other partners, because there is a voice now that can be recognized that if anything go through UKPC, then the rest of the community will also get to know it because it's tried and tested. We are 7 years plus now, and next year will be 8 years. And look, if you ask me, if I thought this would be as it is now, maybe I wouldn't be sure, but now I'm very sure where we're headed.
There's a couple of narratives when you think about key populations, and in the general public that I've heard. One narrative is that, these are, just promiscuous people, number one. The other narrative is that you train children to take on identities that they're not otherwise their identities, So how do we change that narrative? Because I think a lot of this comes from a place of fear.
That narrative is the most damaging. The fact that, people frame it as, they recruit children. And I must say it's entirely false. It's entirely false because there's no scientific evidence, none that supports that people can be recruited into being LGBT. When we talk about sexual orientation and gender identity, there's nothing like you can catch it, like maybe you drink on the same glass of water and then, you'll catch a cold, or someone can persuade you into...
It's not an infection.
It's not influenza. But also I must say that these claims are are most oftenly used to steer fear and also justify violence or harmful laws. They divert the attention from the real issues that are affecting children. Let's talk about poverty. Let's talk about lack of education. Let's talk about abuse and poor healthcare. Those are conversations that we should be having. But what I can tell you is that from our work at UKPC, LGBT people are ordinary Ugandans. They're parents, they're caregivers, they're professionals, they're contributing to their families and communities. They are not a threat to children. So what really threatens children is misinformation. We choose compassion, we choose evidence, but also we need to look at human rights. We must also create a safe and healthier society for everyone. And this society can only be created if we move away from steering fear. And also this is a lot of scapegoating, because if you look at our really issues, it's not the LGBT. So I think the fact that society is always looking for an excuse, and unfortunately every generation, the minorities will always pick up. We cannot even talk about vulnerability of LGBT people and not forgetting to talk about women and girls, like how society pushes women and girls on the margins. It's because patriarchy tells us that men are superior. And this is how things are done. And I think we need to start speaking about this injustice and speak more about the fear that people try to push and create even laws that govern or how people are supposed to relate, we need to speak against that more, but also create more spaces for children to grow in healthy environments, not in poverty, having access to education, but also growing in homes and society that protect them. And I think that should be our focus, because all that is done is propagate and create harm and hate against the LGBTI people, which is actually not true.
Some of the data that we have is that the prevalence levels amongst the populations you serve in terms of HIV, and HIV is a very important proxy indicator telling us what's going on, is that in our region, within just female sex workers, and I know that sex workers are in their diversity, but just female sex workers, their prevalence of HIV is about 29%. So that's about 1 out of every three to four female sex workers that has HIV. For men having sex with men, gay men, and men having sex with men, that's about 13%. So that's, give and take 1 out of every 7, 8 men. Injecting drug users, higher than that. So that's a little bit higher than that, at about 21%. So that's 1 out of every 5. For transgender communities, this is even the highest. This is at 42%, almost a half, 1 out of every 2.2. So these are very high prevalence levels in the populations that you serve. So there's very high levels of vulnerability, clearly, but at the same time, you're operating in a hostile environment.
Uganda's parliament has passed a bill which would criminalize people who identify as LGBTQ, with those found guilty facing up to 10 years in prison.
In Uganda, where there's laws that make it difficult to operate, how do you get around that?
I really appreciate that question. And I want to start by saying that, you see, they say we are vulnerable. But I want to say that there's nothing like vulnerable, because my communities are not naturally vulnerable but to HIV. But I think what makes my communities vulnerable is the conditions that they are forced to live in. And for example, in Uganda and many parts in Africa, my community faces criminalization, stigma, discrimination. Like, imagine having to think twice before you even go to have an HIV test, because you fear to be arrested, you fear to be exposed, you fear to be judged. So that fear pushes us as a community to stay away from services. In 2012, when I was doing documentation for the movement of the LGBT movement in Uganda, and I was speaking to one individual, and they told me that one time they went to a health facility for testing, and when they asked them who their partner was, their boyfriend was outside, so they were happy that someone had asked. So they went to call their partner. And when their partner came into the room, they were ridiculed. So imagine that humiliation where they call the entire staff and everyone is looking at you. By the time you leave that health facility, you never feel like coming back. And these are things that continue to happen in our health facilities, in our societies. And I think this is why we need to evaluate ourselves as general society altogether.
If you were to advise another country where there is violence, there's criminalization, there's high levels of HIV amongst key populations, these populations that you serve, and they need to safeguard populations, what would be your advice to them?
The starting point is giving hope to the community. They need to understand that they are loved and cherished. And it's from that self-love that then we can seek the outside. we cannot do this work in isolation. We have to identify with other people's causes. Because if you're talking about LGBT, the young LGBT, so the issues of young people should be your cause too. The issues of women should be your cause too, because even among LGBT, there are lesbian women. When we talk about HIV, we should be at the forefront. If we talk about SRHR, so really identifying with other people's causes is really, really important, because then it creates a movement that is just not about people's identities, but it's a movement that brings together everybody. The other thing is we must document our lived realities, the challenges that we get. We must document them and share them. People need to put a face on a gay man from Uganda, Richard Lusimbo, and others. Like, we must put a face to our realities. We cannot speak. If you cannot speak in public, then we must create spaces safe enough to speak behind masks, but still our message should be passed. The other is, an important also, is that we must reach out and open communication channels with our governments. Governments belong to us, the people. The leaders who pass these laws are elected by us, and we must hold them accountable. This is why dialogue must continue. This is why my engagement with government must continue. This is why we can never leave any stone unturned. Government must listen, because it's their duty to listen to us, their citizens. And this is something that we need to do. Right now, every country is talking about integration. So if we're talking about integration of health facilities or primary health care, where will our communities go if we have not had those conversations with government? This is why we must engage governments too. But also, we need to work widely with other civil society beyond identifying other people's causes. Other civil society, we need to work with them, because their issues are issues too. And I mean, we should be part of our national development. Regardless of the margins they may push us, we should always find a way to pull ourselves up there to make sure that we are actually at the table. I don't care how much you may look at me, you may not like me, but when I speak for Ugandans. I don't speak just for me. My advocacy is just not for LGBT or key populations. If you look at my advocacy in SRHR spaces and HIV, I speak for Ugandans. I speak for human beings.
Wow. I'm listening to you and I'm thinking, I've been to many schools of leadership. I've heard a lot about leadership, but it is rare to hear about leadership like this. So you've developed a model of leadership that sounds to me should be in, our schools of leadership around the world. What are 2 or 3 lessons that you can say, if I was to teach leadership from my experience, these would be the 3 or 4 leadership lessons?
I don't lead my community. My community leads me, because I am their vessel. And so mine is to pass on the communication. And while we may be of different identities, different sexual orientations, I think one common thing is that we want something that is better for the communities. And this is one way I have managed to navigate the different power dynamics, but also the different leaders. I meet every leader at their point. I've made myself very accessible. I can be reached on the phone, I can be reached on email, but also the team that I work with, there's a very clear communication that if you can't work for the community, then you're in a wrong place. Community comes first.
Uganda is among countries across the globe developing HIV sustainability roadmaps to increase domestic investments in HIV programs as mass donor fund cuts continue to jeopardize the world's push to end AIDS as a public health threat by 2030, a goal that was within grasp before this disruption.
Uganda wants 0 HIV infections by 2030. but officials admit they may not get there unless more support reaches the girls and young women most at risk. And that story isn't unique to this country. It's playing out across the region.
You had a major disruption this year, and that must have been a major hit. But somehow you seem to have maintained your organizations. How have you done that? How have you been able to stay afloat with your head up at a time when, you're not recognized, there's conflicting demands, and there's massive cuts, and still you're leading from this place of community leadership? What are the lessons that we can draw from that?
UKPC, my organization, we lost 70% of our funding. And we also learned after doing a study, which also released in our report, No Time to Wait, just a few weeks after the disruption, we learned that almost 96% of our member organizations had lost big chunks of their funding because they were relying on the US funding. While January was a moment of reckoning, and partly February, with the report and really documenting the process and sharing those results, I spoke to the community and said, we cannot remain in tears. We as leaders and we as a community need to look at the needs of the community and identify the solutions. But also really looking within the resources that we had, because we had to also look internally. If it was, for example, lubricants, if you had more stock, then we had to identify and say, you must share this stock with the next DIC in this region where you are. We need to document our realities, both when we win, but also when we feel challenged. And while sometimes I don't like using the word challenge, I usually say, an UKPC tradition, what people call challenges, we call them what we are learning. Because when people always sit back when they hear challenges, it becomes something that cannot be moved. It's like a Table Mountain in Cape Town. But when you say things we are learning, it means as you learn, you're trying to do something about it. And that's the kind of philosophy that we've been using and pushing us. And this is why, regardless of the challenge, we may not be 100%, but we're also able to really recognize how we could merge our things and push. But also another last thing I want to say, particularly on this, is we need to run organizations beyond what donors want us to do. If we have a strategic plan, then donors must also fit into our strategic plans. And I think what's serving us is that while there's been so much shifting in funding, we're implementing more so our strategic plan. So if we had 50 here, then if 50 is gone and we have 20 here, it means that we can still work in those means to continue the programs that we're doing. And I think for me, that's one key lesson is, and directly to donors and partners, is that community organizations like mine should be supported to implement work within their strategic plans. I know as partners and donors, you have your own, they have their own strategic plans, but I think they need to align to community needs because that's what sustainability looks like.
Wow, I'm speechless. We've walked through a conversation about how you went from being a young man, volunteering at a time when really it was old mamas who were doing the volunteering, not young boys. So that in itself was already a differentiator. So perhaps how we can inspire other young people to step into voluntarism in a way that is serving all. The inclusivity of the work that you do and being able to work so much in leadership in ways that are inclusive and involving everybody. That has learned so many different lessons that bring people together, that convene, and coordinate and build strategies and plans. Shifting power has become synonymous with your name. You're a power shifter. This is what we associate with you, Richard. I stood there one day and you were speaking to donors. And I remember they were talking about capacity building. And you stood up and you said, you and I went to the same schools. You have built my capacity enough. I can build your capacity. So as we wrap up this conversation, you've used a very strong human rights approach. You have shifted power by working with governments. If you were to give us a concluding message to share with global platforms about how people living with HIV and the key populations and the communities that you serve could reach the goal of ending AIDS by 2030, what would be your 3 big messages?
I'll say for us to win the battle, we just need to return to the basics. You see, even before we got life-saving medication or treatment, or even prevention tools, what was really saving people was compassion. The fact that there was love that helped people to live longer. It gave them hope that actually there was a promise. And now we have that promise, which is ARVs. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that there's accessibility for the ARVs. That hope is now a reality. So people who are living with HIV should be able to have access to their treatment. And this treatment should be given with care, with compassion, with no stigma, with no discrimination. The other thing is availing the prevention tools. You know, we've talked about rich countries, poor countries. Like, we have seen that with the fight with the HIV, it's just not an issue of a group of people or society or country or continent. This is a global crisis that we must work together. And COVID had to learn the hard, like we had to use the HIV structures to actually fight COVID, especially in our countries. And it goes back to availability or prevention. Like, we're now talking about getting an injection just twice a year to prevent you from HIV. That should be availed. And if we talk about accessibility of the different tools, like, let's allow the different communities make decisions. Let the women make decisions on which tool they should use. Let the girls make that decision. Let the gay men, let the trans people, let the sex workers, let the people who inject and use drugs choose. Like, let's avail them. And this is the only way we're going to. And also, while we're doing all that, we must be addressing inequalities. We must be addressing issues around criminalization. We cannot be giving from one arm and taking out from the other. Criminalization of populations, we've seen that actually creates their problems, even worsens the situation. So the issue of decrim should be on our tongues. So we need to talk about compassion, which means that hope, which is ARVs, is accessible. We must also talk about accessibilities of all tools around prevention, that they should be available. They should not be around one country or the other. They should be availed, and the choices should be multiple. Yeah, and lastly, we need to talk about decriminalization of key populations, decriminalization of people living with HIV. Like, we can't. This is 2025, where we should know better, where we have availability of evidence. And I mean, we should be doing right by our people.
Richard, Thank you so much. This has been such a great conversation and really so educational for all of us. I have so many more questions I'd love to ask you. But I think you have given us real insights into the work that you've done, into the challenges of the work that you do, but concluding so well by telling us that compassion, access, decriminalize, equality, and access for everyone ultimately is what is going to make the difference. And doing so coordinated with governments, with communities, all of us holding hands. Thank you, Richard. This has been a great conversation. All the best.
Thank you so much, Anna, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you.
A luta continua.
A luta continua.
A luta continua.
A luta continua.
Bye.
Bye.
My name is Anne Githuku Shongwe. I'm the UNAIDS Regional Director for East and Southern Africa. This podcast is brought to you by the partnership Together for SRHR.